What's up, college football fans? Don't forget to check out and order your copy of Stiff Arming Football Myths, our latest football game plan book. So go on our website at footballgameplan.com/books and get your copy. We have these available in paperback as well as in PDF form. Welcome to footballgameplan.com, where football makes sense. I'm Memory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Bring you our FBS Week 1 wraparound. We're going to go across the country in the college football landscape to give you a look-see inside some of the key games that's on the schedule this week. And we're going to start this video off as Abilene Christian makes a trip down to Atlanta to take on Georgia State.
Abilene Christian and Georgia State kick off the first big week of college football, with Georgia State coming off a winless season and Abilene Christian transitioning from the Division II level to the FCS last year. It still should make for an exciting matchup this week, and I would keep an eye on Abilene Christian's running back Herschel Sims, former Oklahoma State tailback, who get the opportunity to be the guy this year for the Wildcats. Now, Georgia State loses big-time playmaker Albert Wilson, but Robert Davis at 6'3", 190 pounds should do just fine in the #1 wide receiver role. Now, both teams are replacing a lot of key contributors, but I like Georgia State in this ball game. They have the advantage up front on both sides of the ball, and look for quarterback Nick Arbuckle to have a big-time day throwing the football. Rutgers travels out west again for their opener. This time it's against Washington State, and right off the bus we know the Cougars will toss the football around the stadium with Connor Holliday, who's fearless, but he has to take better care of the football. The good part is that the Cougs have 14 starters returning, and I would expect them to be even better offensively. Now, Rutgers is returning 16 starters, 9 on an offense led by the talented running back duo of Paul James and Justin Goodwin. The offensive line looks impressive, and defensively, they returned 7 starters from a defense that was very stout versus the run. Now, their run defense is virtually irrelevant in this matchup, but the Scarlet Knights are very good coverage-wise in the second and third levels with linebacker Steve Longa and also cornerback Nadir Barnwell. So look for Rutgers to limit quarterback Gary Nova's opportunities by leaning on the running game, while defensively being able to slow down Wazoo's passing attack just enough to come away victorious. Also look for tight end Tyler Croft to have success this week as well. There's 2 young, exciting quarterbacks in this ball game with P.J. Walker for Temple and Steven Rivers for Vanderbilt. And the biggest question for Temple is up front along that offensive line and at wide receiver. Can they get better? Can they gel quickly enough? And we know they have the talent in the backfield, and Walker will have a breakout season. We also know that the Owls have one of the best linebackers in the country in Tyler Matekovich, who had 137 stops last season. Vanderbilt is losing their all-time leading receiver in Jordan Matthews and their entire secondary, but I'm a big fan of their linebackers, Darian Herring and also Kyle Wolfsman. I think this will be a defensive battle, but I like Temple in this ball game. I think the Owls will surprise a lot of teams this year, and look for running back Zaire Williams and also Kenneth Harper to have a huge impact in the passing game versus Vanderbilt. This should be one hell of a football game between Texas San Antonio and Houston. The Roadrunners won 5 straight games to close out the 2013 season and are primed to make it to a bowl game in only their 4th year of existence. They returned 20 starters and are armed with one of the best offensive lines in Conference USA. The biggest loss is at quarterback. Can Tucker Carter be effective enough or efficient enough to keep the offense on pace is the biggest question they have going into the season. Now, Houston, on the other hand, is loaded on both sides of the ball. Their defense excels on both ends, and they get great play from their linebacking core. Offensively, sophomore quarterback John O'Corn and superstar wide receiver Deontay Greenberry should put up great numbers once again this season. Now, this should develop into a nice rivalry between these 2 programs. I like the Cougars in this ball game, too explosive and dynamic on both sides of the ball. It's the Rocky Mountain Showdown as both Colorado State and Colorado kick off their college football season. Last year's matchup, the Buffaloes upset the Rams thanks in part to Paul Richardson and his big day. Well, he's now moved on to the NFL, and the Buffaloes, outside of wide receiver Nelson Spruce, have a lot of questions. Now, the Rams, on the other hand, are stacked at the skill positions and in the back 7 defensively. Look for quarterback Garrett Grayson to build on the sensational 2013 season. Now, the question for Colorado State is on both sides of the line of scrimmage. They lost a lot of talent up front in the trenches. I do think, however, they still have enough to knock off Colorado and avoid the upset this year. New head coach James Franklin brings a lot of energy and excitement to Happy Valley, and offensively, you can see why he's excited. Super sophomore quarterback Christian Hackenberg is a tremendous talent, and there's good depth in the backfield. The receiving core and offensive line are the big-time question marks, while defensively, the Nittany Lions will be tough in the secondary, but can they get to the quarterback this year will be the question. Defensive ends Deion Barnes and C.J. Olanian will try to up that sack number this season. UCF must replace quarterback Blake Bortles, but still are a dangerous bunch that's returning 15 starters from a squad that beat Baylor in the Fiesta Bowl pretty soundly. Now, the good news for the sophomore quarterback Justin Holman is that he has a wealth of talent at his disposal, led by running back William Stanback and wide receiver Rennell Hill, amongst others. Now, defensively is where UCF can cause problems for anybody they face this year. They have the athleticism and the talent at every level. Their front seven does a phenomenal job versus the run, and this is a football team that knocked off Penn State last year, and I think they'll do it again. This time at home, I like UCF. Intriguing matchup here between Georgia Southern and North Carolina State, and former Sam Houston State head coach Willie Fritz takes over a Georgia Southern team that's in their first year of the FBS, and this is also the same squad that knocked off last year's Florida Gators in Gainesville. They return 15 starters, and we know Coach Fritz preaches up-tempo and also running the football, and in my opinion, this is a perfect mesh of style and personnel. North Carolina State will be breaking in a new quarterback with Jacoby Brissett, a former Florida Gator, ironically, and he'll be giving the Wolfpack a quarterback with mobility that also possesses a fearlessness in the pocket. The offensive line is a veteran-laden group that's solid on the edges, but in order for NC State to move forward, they have to improve significantly on the defensive side of football. Defensive linemen Art Norman and Thomas Till are solid players, but overall the Wolfpack must be a little bit more forceful versus the run. I actually like Georgia Southern in the upset. North Carolina State had issues versus run-heavy teams last year like Boston College, Syracuse, even Maryland was able to have success. I think you'll see a heavy running game from the Eagles, ultimately controlling the clock en route to winning the football game. And I would also keep an eye on defensive back Kim Butler for Georgia Southern. He could have a huge impact in this ball game. Clemson and Georgia meet again to open the season. Last year's game was an instant classic. This year's game features two fabulous defenses, with both offenses replacing two of college football's best quarterbacks in Aaron Murray and Taj Boyd. Looking at Clemson, they're losing their top passer, rusher, and both receivers, as well as key parts of their offensive line. Georgia's biggest loss is at quarterback, and they return one of college football's best running backs in Todd Gurley. Like I mentioned earlier, these two defenses are very good. Clemson's Vic Beasley leads a group that can get after the quarterback while also being suffocating versus the run. And Georgia's Ramick Wilson and Amarlo Herrera are two excellent inside linebackers. I like Georgia in this ball game. I think it'll be their ability to control the clock with Gurley and Kevin Marshall, who should be ready to go this ball game, and they'll be able to make things uncomfortable with their defense for a young Clemson offense. Louisiana Tech takes on Oklahoma, and I like this matchup because you get to see a very good La Tech running game with tailback Kenneth Dixon behind a very good offensive line, and we get to see Oklahoma quarterback Trevor Knight, who played great in the Sooners' Sugar Bowl domination of Alabama. The problem for La Tech will be the passing game. Can quarterback Ryan Higgins protect the ball a little bit better this season? Defensively, they return 7, but they do lose 2 key defensive linemen in Ike Enemkmpale and defensive tackle Justin Ellis. Now for Oklahoma defensively, they return virtually everyone sans 2 key playmakers in the secondary, and this was a group that got better each and every week. Offensively, I look for wide receiver Sterling Shepard to be the next big-time wideout coming out of Norman, Oklahoma, and despite the question marks in the backfield, I still like the Sooners to win this ball game. Here's a rematch of last year's Las Vegas Bowl as Fresno State travels to USC, and this is still a strong Trojans football team, and I'm excited to see both sophomore safeties Leon McQuay and Sewell Cravens, and Fresno State safety Deron Smith is one of the best in the country. Now where they differ this time around is that Fresno State's offense loses a lot of firepower and experience, and they have to replace quarterback Derek Carr and also wide receiver Devontae Adams. The offensive line is solid, and running back Josh Quezada and wide receiver Josh Harper does give them hope, but defensively USC is very strong in the trenches with defensive tackle Leonard Williams as well as at linebacker, and new head coach Steve Sarkisian also inherits a very talented offense that returns 7 starters, including quarterback Cody Kessler, and looking for the well-balanced Trojans to pick up right where they left off in the bowl game by knocking off Fresno State, who in my opinion will still win the Mountain West Conference. 7 years later, we finally get the Appalachian State-Michigan rematch. While this year's App State team doesn't have the firepower of the 07 squad, They do have very good talent in quarterback Cameron Bryant and the versatile running back Marcus Cox playing behind a veteran offensive line. The defense is the Achilles heel, especially as far as getting to the quarterback is concerned, and there's a ton of youth in the front seven that'll have to grow up pretty quickly out there in Ann Arbor. As for Michigan, this team looks solid all the way around on both sides of the ball, and I'm interested to see what running back Derek Green can bring to the table as a starting sophomore tailback. As quarterback Devin Gardner makes strides, so will this football team. Don't worry about the Wolverines defense. This is a star-studded group that will avoid the upset this time around as they knock off Appalachian State. No Johnny Manziel, no Jadeveon Clowney, but that doesn't mean that Texas A&M and South Carolina isn't a must-see battle in the SEC. A&M will be starting sophomore Kenny Hill at quarterback, and he has a boatload of talented options at wide receiver with true freshman Speedy Noyle and redshirt freshman Ricky Seals-Jones along with Malcolm Kennedy. So the passing game shouldn't have a fall off in my opinion, and I would expect the running game to be more of an asset this year with Trey Carson and the speedster Trey Williams, who I think should be the starter tailback in the backfield. Outside of Jake Matthews, the offensive line remains intact, and the hope is that a defense that gave up 32 points a game will be vastly improved with 9 starters returning. There is promise in the secondary, but the front seven has to get better. Now, South Carolina's biggest losses came on the defensive side of football with Jadeveon Clowney, Kelsey Quarles, Victor Hampton. They're all gone, as well as Jimmy Legree. But Spurrier and company brought in some top JUCO talent to alleviate the sting. They're much better than A&M's defense, even with the losses. And on offense, 8 starters returned, led by guard A.J. Cann, who's one of the best guards in the country, and running back Mike Davis. Dylan Thompson gets the nod at quarterback, and just like A&M's Kenny Hill, he has a lot of great options to throw the football to. This one will be all about which defense can get stops, and while A&M has a lot of offensive firepower, I have to take the wait-and-see approach with their defense. I like the Gamecocks to come away victorious. There's a lot to be excited about in Morgantown this year. Despite coming off a 4-8 season, quarterback Clint Trickett is back as a starter, and the goal is keeping him healthy. Now, there's a wealth of talent at his disposal. Wide receiver Mario Alford and Kevin White are excellent targets. White is a legit pro prospect. And in the backfield is former Pitt transfer Russell Shell. He's a solid all-around player that'll team up with Dreamius Smith and Wendell Smallwood, who will also be playing a little bit more receiver this year. And they also get back Andrew Bowie in the backfield. The offensive line has some questions on the edges, but not on the inside because of guard Mark Walensky and Quentin Spain. Defensively, 7 starters return, but what they have to do better is apply pressure, and one guy that can do that is transfer Shaquille Riddick from Gardner-Webb, who at 6'7", 245 pounds, can provide that pressure off the edge. He was a FCS All-American last year with 10.5 TFLs and 8.5 sacks. Carl Joseph, Ishmael Banks in the secondary, while linebackers Isaiah Bruce and Nick Kwiatkowski gives the Mountaineers a chance in the back seven. Now, Nick Saban hasn't named the starting quarterback yet, but whether or not it's Blake Sims or Jake Coker, they'll be sitting pretty on an offense because of what Alabama possesses around them. I'm a big fan of Bama's tight ends in Jalson Fowler, O.J. Howard, and Brian Vogler. I think they could have a huge impact in this ball game, as well as tailbacks T.J. Yeldon and Derrick Henry. Defensively, teams like West Virginia usually gives Alabama problems, especially in the back seven, so it'll be up to guys like safety Landon Collins to make sure everything is in order on the back end, while linebacker Trey DePriest keeps everyone gap, disciplined, and sound up front. This will be a very close game, but I like Alabama's ability to slow the game down with the ground game, and their tight end play, I believe, will have an impact on both aspects of offense, playing a huge role. And also, don't forget to check out every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, College Football Now on our Football Game Plan Radio Network, located at blogtalkradio.com/footballgameplan.